Hello everyone. Today this video is going to be about how the police handled all of my sexual assault cases. So if you've seen my other videos, you know that I am an advocate for survivors of sexual abuse, and I was a victim for many years of my life, and I now identify as a survivor. So during my childhood, when I was age 3 to age 11, I was sexually abused. I have a video about that I will link here. But during that case, I had a social worker come to my school. I was in high school when I reported. I stayed silent for, I was 16 when the social worker came to my school, so I stayed silent for 5 years. After the abuse had ended. And the social worker came to my school because I had talked to a psychologist who was a mandatory reporter and had to report that to social work. And during the interview with the social workers, they asked me questions about my safety and my home situation. And after that, I had a detective assigned to my case, which was in another state, because at this time I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, rather than in Massachusetts, where this had occurred. And so they got it assigned to the correct jurisdiction, and then I had to complete a child forensic interview, which basically is when a trained social worker who specializes in forensics interviews a child about their sexual abuse, and then that can be played in court rather than having the child re-traumatized by having to share their story publicly in court. So it's a very useful and helpful method for a lot of children who go through these horrible situations. After my forensic interview, the police had contact with my mom, and they were able to talk to her directly about all of the case information, because I was still young and I was in high school, and it was a lot emotionally to deal with when you're just still a teenager. And so I would talk to my mom about it and get like secondhand information from her, and then if I had any questions, she would relay it to the detective, and then I would also talk to the detective sometimes whenever I felt like it was going to be helpful for me. But he was very kind and asked me for my wants and my needs regarding the case, which was great. My main thing was I wanted him to get my perpetrator to get interviewed, and I wanted all of his family members to know of my allegations and to be able to understand what had happened, so that they could keep themselves and their children safe, so that what happened to me wouldn't happen again, or if it already had, they could feel comfortable coming forward knowing that this has happened and they're not the only ones going through it. So that was my main request, and the detective on my case was able to go to his residence and was able to relay this information to his family, and was able to interview him on the allegations, and he obviously denied them, which is very common in these types of cases. But the police investigation for my childhood sexual abuse was very well done, in my opinion, from what I remember during that time. And it went on from like about 16 to 17. It was a pretty short case because there wasn't any physical evidence, and those cases are extremely difficult to prove, and no one else who had been abused by him previously wanted to come forward. So it was really just my word against his, and I was told that I probably wouldn't get any justice, and I didn't want to face him in court. If I wouldn't testify, I'd at least have the forensic interview given, but it wasn't going to be enough for a conviction. So ultimately that case ended, and I'm at a spot in my life where I'm happy with how the case went, and while I wish that he could be rotting in jail, It just wasn't a possibility, unfortunately. My next case was a sextortion experience that I went through when I was 15 years old, and that case took 2 years. I will link my sextortion case on this video so that you can go watch that if you haven't seen it before. I also have videos that talk about what sextortion is and give more of an understanding of all of that. So I'll also link those. But basically, once it ended and I told people, I was brought to the police station and tried to talk to a detective, and they sent me over to the high school police officer, who then started the investigation for my case. And the main thing they had to do was find the IP address for the user's information, so the Instagram, Snapchat, all of these different accounts that my perpetrator made and used to perpetrate crimes of sextortion, which include coercion and blackmail and all of these other crimes. And the IP address originally went into the bottom of a lake, but after months and months and months, they were able to finally trace one of the accounts to an actual residence, where they figured out it was one of my classmates. And that entire investigation was really difficult because it was a high school classmate. So I was walking around school with this person, not knowing it was them. And then when I did know it was them, they couldn't expel him until a court case determined if he was guilty. And so I ended up doing my finals in the assistant principal's office, and took some time away from school as well. But that case, I think, was handled pretty well. I did have a lot of frustrating moments, a lot of time where I was really irritated of how long it was taking, and that I didn't feel like I was being heard, but the police officer that was on my case was extremely thorough and did a great investigation. And so then that was handed over to the prosecutor. But before she handed it over, she requested my perpetrator to write me a letter of apology, which is not something that was court mandated. It was just the police officer asking him to write that. So I was really grateful for her doing that, even though the apology letter really didn't mean anything to me because I knew he wasn't sorry. It meant a lot to me that she cared enough to have him write something acknowledging what he did. Ultimately, that case went to court and everything, but that is all in my sextortion video of my story, so you can go watch that for more information. The next case that I will be discussing is my college rape. So I originally reported to the Title IX office, which is separate from the police, and I didn't report to the police until almost a year after my rape on campus, because I was terrified and I was getting harassed on campus by classmates, and it was just a very difficult experience. So once I arrived to the police station on my college campus, I shared everything, had an interview done, and it took a long time for them to get all of that information together and finally be able to go drive hours to go interview my perpetrator at his residence. And they were able to do that and record it, and then the detective, who was just extremely kind to me but also very realistic and knew how these cases went and knew that I was unlikely to get justice, I just really appreciated how honest he was with me about everything. And so he sent all the information to the prosecutor and stayed in touch with me, and I then got a letter from the prosecution's office, citing a lack of evidence to go forward with the case, which was devastating. But I really had a great experience with that police officer, and I know that so many people have horrible experiences with the police and with the justice system, and while I won't say that mine was perfect, I do feel very blessed that I didn't have horrendous experiences with police regarding sexual assault cases. And I want every victim to know that they have the ability to have a victim advocate accompany them to any interviews or anything like that. Every time you go to the police, you are able to have a victim advocate with you. That is your right. And I think it's really important for all victims and survivors of crimes to know that and to really understand it, and to feel empowered to use their own voice to ask for things that are totally justified and extremely helpful for your own healing and for understanding the legal system, which is just so complicated, especially when you're already going through trauma. So thank you for listening to this little story time of how the police handled my SA cases. And if you have any questions or you want to share your story, feel free to in the comments. But thank you so much for watching this video.